Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for subscribing. Your support motivates me to share many great stories with you. When I was traveling with my friends, I joked to him that he was mine until he did this. I never thought I would actually ask for relationship advice on Reddit. I had talked to family, friends, and therapists, but I still felt the need for different opinions. What better place to find diverse advice than from people I don't even know? So, I will tell my story using fake names to protect privacy. My name is Alice, I'm 25 years old, and I've been in a relationship for 2 years. My boyfriend, Luke, is also 25 years old. I'm completely crazy about him. I never thought I would find a perfect boyfriend until we started dating. He's so sweet and treats me like a goddess. He remembers the smallest details about our relationship and sometimes gives me gifts related to them. My family loves him more than they love me. And in conclusion, he's amazing and I'll love him forever. That said, we didn't have a perfect or easy start to our relationship. I was newly attracted to Luke, and he had been best friends with my ex-boyfriend. I know, right? It was even worse. I had cheated on my ex to get together with Luke, and that's why our relationship started the way it did. Before you judge me, let me explain the complicated history of my past relationships. I was 20 years old when I started dating my ex, Eric. I met him and Luke in college. We had different majors, but we went to the same school, so we kept running into each other. We would attend the same parties, and they started becoming friends with my friends. Eric and I got closer and started dating after we kissed at a school party. The next 3 years of my life were spent with Eric. I never thought I was the kind of girl who would prioritize her boyfriend over everything else. At that time, I was really struggling with that feeling. I constantly reminded myself that whether or not I had Eric, I needed to focus on my academic and career goals because those are my top priorities. But the truth was Eric needed care. If I couldn't pay attention to him or take time off for my exams, he would feel deeply hurt and abandoned. I often found myself wondering about his feelings, not just the usual thoughts of my boyfriend. I often became distracted, especially when I had deadlines. Being with him was draining. I loved him, but being with him was too much. It wasn't a healthy relationship, and he was a sensitive topic between me and Luke. Both Eric and I struggled with mental health issues. We understood each other and supported each other, but over time, we got so lost in the pain that we just lived in a depressive spiral together. When academic stress became too much, Eric formed a habit of drinking heavily to forget his problems. Things got worse during our second year. At that time, Luke began showing up more in our lives. He lived in a dorm with 2 other guys, but that year, he moved out to live with a girlfriend off campus. Eventually, they broke up, and she left him to pay the rent for the rest of the year because she felt guilty. He still lived there, but it felt awkward because no students were assigned to his room. I frequently asked him for help, especially when Eric was throwing up and locked in the bathroom. He was always there for me, and seeing him care for Eric made me feel more stressed about my feelings. The conversations between us were not normal. But every time these things happened, part of me grew to care less about Eric. One evening, I arrived at our dorm at 6 p.m., and Eric was supposed to be back by then. I found Luke in the living room watching TV alone. We talked and watched his favorite shows while waiting for Eric. When Eric still wasn't there, Luke gently asked if he could talk to me. He seemed concerned. I kept waiting, calling Eric repeatedly. At around 8 p.m., Luke told me he was probably busy and had forgotten to tell me. I immediately realized he was trying to make me feel better while I was waiting for Eric. By 9 p.m., Eric finally showed up, and I was furious. I was already upset from waiting for 3 hours without any messages, and when I saw Eric, I was ready to yell at him. As I confronted him, my emotions took over, and it quickly escalated into a fight. Eric slapped me in the face. My vision went dark, and when I regained consciousness, I saw Luke holding Eric back, trying to keep him away from me. Luke made sure I was okay before asking me to wait outside. I ran out of the apartment, unable to control my tears. The next morning, I woke up in Luke's apartment, feeling calm. He took care of me, made tea, and offered me clean clothes. I spent the following days at Luke's place, not wanting to go back to Eric's. Eric begged me to take him back, but I couldn't. After months of trying to make Eric feel better, I finally broke up with him. Luke supported me through all of this, and we started getting closer. A month later, After Eric had entered a rehab facility, I told him I was now with Luke. Eric was sad but accepted it. Our relationship was over. Looking back, I have no regrets. Luke was the best thing that ever happened to me, and our relationship is amazing. However, things got complicated when we went on a trip with friends. During a late-night conversation, I joked about Luke being my situation of success, but Luke didn't react well. He seemed uncomfortable and later admitted that he couldn't handle the guilt about the past, especially with Eric. We both realized that our relationship had a complicated history. Luke felt like Eric was a ghost in our lives, and we still had unfinished business to resolve. He didn't want to talk about it, but I understood. The story continues with Luke being distant for a while after that trip, but we eventually had a heart-to-heart talk. Luke admitted that he needed to move past Eric, but he couldn't yet. I supported him through it, and we are still working through it. I know there's still a lot to address, but I believe we're strong enough to handle it together. It's okay. A lot will make up for it. Let's go have dinner tonight. Let me know what time you'll be home later, my love. I texted him saying everything was fine, but I can't help but worry about this reunion. I deeply know in my heart that Luke will be affected more than I will when he sees Eric. In my opinion, this isn't a good idea, and I'll be anxious until Sunday when they go out for coffee. Luke has his number from some guy in our old college. They talked and decided to meet up. What do you think? Should I be worried? Should I go with him? I'm afraid Luke has been acting strange for several days, and my own insecurity makes me think he might break up with me because of guilt. I can't think straight about this anymore. Maybe he's acting like this because he's stressed about meeting Eric. I don't know. He's distant, and I hope things won't get worse when he comes back from the meeting with Eric. I'll update as soon as I can. Hey Reddit, I'm back with updates about my messy situation. Before I check on you all, Luke is meeting my ex, Eric, who used to be his best friend. I told Luke I was fine with him meeting Eric, as long as I could pick him up afterward. I told him to go without the car, and I got there half an hour earlier than Luke requested, as I was about to die waiting for time to pass, and I wanted to see how the conversation went. I parked in front of the cafe, where I could see them sitting together, chatting calmly. Eric seemed fine. He was normal. I kept watching them talk. Sometimes they laughed. It felt like I was back 3 years ago, watching them talk as if they were still roommates, which gave me goosebumps. Many of you said Luke just wanted to clear his conscience, and that's actually true. I just don't trust Eric and don't want to think about the possibility of them becoming friends again. I got comments asking if I had heard anything about Eric, but the truth is, people don't talk about him with us. Most of our friends aren't even close to him. I texted Luke just as he asked me to come. I saw him immediately, picked up my phone, and texted him back. He said, "I'll be out soon. Do you want anything?" I replied that I just wanted him to get out of there, and he laughed for a moment. I thought about walking to the front of the cafe to talk to them, but I couldn't control my impulses. I expected them to come out the door and breathe fresh air outside the car. Luke looked at me like I was crazy, and Eric turned to look at me. But when he saw Luke, his eyes wandered behind him. Eric turned back and looked at me like he saw a ghost. Hearing Eric say my name was like a punch in the stomach. I immediately got angry as I left the car. I greeted them and asked how the conversation went. They both agreed it was fine. They seemed okay. Eric started asking about my life and how I was. I just felt like I wanted to throw up, but instead I said, "Sorry, I can't do this. I just wanted to ask because it's been a while since we've seen each other. Can we go, Luke?" I looked at my boyfriend with an amazing expression, and he smiled slightly. "I'm sorry, it was uncomfortable. I know it was nice to meet you," Eric said, laughing bitterly. I just wanted to punch him, but anyway, Luke and I said goodbye. Before I could leave, Eric started talking again. "I'm sorry for everything, Alice. You don't deserve any of what I did to you. I hope you're happy always." He seemed to expect some sort of response, but Luke and I just looked at each other with empty expressions. Then he smiled and walked away. "You were so brave to do that," Luke said to me on the way to the car. I asked him if it was over and if he needed anything because I didn't want to go through it again. He smiled and said I didn't need to worry about that anymore. They could talk about whatever, but Luke didn't pay much attention to me. He hinted that I should understand that he would never contact Eric again because if Luke had to meet him, he would fight with him, but more strongly because of what Eric did to me over the years. Whenever he thought about Eric, he only thought about fighting him, and somehow he had to pay for the pain he caused in our lives. But he was tired of those angry feelings coming back, and that's how he dealt with them. It's been 2 days since they talked, and everything has returned to normal. Part of me will keep wondering if Eric will contact him again and whether Luke has any answers, but I'll keep those paranoid thoughts to myself because I never want to hear that name again. After the argument at the beach, Luke and I returned, but there was a frightening distance between us. He was no longer himself. I tried to apologize and explain that the joke had no meaning other than to lighten the mood, but it seemed like it had no effect. Luke even said that maybe he needed some time to think about everything. This left me confused. I started to wonder if Luke was deeply troubled by how we started, or perhaps he felt guilty for betraying his friendship with Eric. Even though I had moved on, Luke still seemed trapped by those memories. We returned home after the trip, but we didn't spend much time together anymore. Luke became quiet and often lost in his own thoughts. I feared losing him, but I didn't know what to do to break down the invisible wall that was growing between us. One evening, after days of tension, I decided I had to confront the issue. I prepared a simple dinner, lit candles to create a warm atmosphere, and invited Luke to sit at the dining table. "Luke, I know something's wrong between us," I began, my voice trembling. "I'm sorry for the joke at the beach. I never meant." Luke interrupted me. "No, Luke, you don't understand. I've known about your past. I've heard stories from people around. You have so many secrets that I can't keep ignoring anymore. Can you tell me everything? I need to know the truth about who you really are." Luke looked at me, his gaze betraying his insecurity. "I'm not, but you." The dinner continued in silence, but in the tense atmosphere, we both knew that this was just the beginning of a fight. We sat quietly, each lost in our own thoughts, neither of us saying anything more. The room was warm with the scent of the meal, but it couldn't ease the tension in the air. I felt everything slowly slipping away around me. We both sank into silence again. The story wasn't over, and I knew our lives would never be the same again. But one thing was clear.